The first time I realized my neighbor was actually insane. I was standing barefoot in my front yard at 6:40 in the morning, holding a coffee mug in one hand and a broken sprinkler head in the other, while a black Range Rover tore across my lawn like it was part of a NASCAR track. Dirt sprayed across my porch, fresh sod rolled up behind her tires in thick muddy strips, and before I could even process what I was looking at, she leaned out the window in giant sunglasses and yelled, "Move your damn decorations somewhere else if you don't want people driving over them." Then she disappeared around the corner like she hadn't just destroyed $2,000 worth of landscaping in under 3 seconds. That right there was the moment my quiet retirement stopped being quiet. My name's Daniel Mercer. I'm 54 years old, retired union electrician, born and raised outside Tulsa, and up until that summer, I honestly thought I'd earned my peace. 31 years crawling through attics, wiring hospitals, commercial buildings, schools. All I wanted was a quiet neighborhood where my wife could sit outside without stress eating her alive. Linda had been dealing with autoimmune issues for years, and our doctor kept telling her the same thing every visit. Less anxiety, more rest, more calm mornings. So when we bought that corner property in Ashwood Creek, it felt like life finally throwing us a bone. I built that yard myself. Not metaphorically, literally. Every inch of it. I installed the irrigation system, laid the stone edging by hand, spent weekends spreading Kentucky bluegrass seed like some middle-aged suburban farmer chasing therapy. I even planted lavender along the fence because Linda liked the smell at sunset. Every morning we'd sit on the porch together, listening to sprinklers tick across the grass while the neighborhood slowly woke up around us. Then Evelyn Cross moved in across the street. Now, look, every neighborhood has somebody difficult. Somebody who thinks HOA rules are the 10 Commandments and treats property lines like military borders. But Evelyn was different. She was the kind of woman who smiled with only her teeth. Early 40s, perfectly straight blonde hair, expensive workout clothes, giant diamond bracelet she somehow wore at 7 in the morning like she was accepting an award nobody asked her to win. Her husband owned some regional development company and apparently helped build half the subdivision, which Evelyn mentioned constantly. And I mean constantly. You know, my husband practically designed this street. You know, the HOA consults with us before major decisions. You know, we've invested a lot into maintaining standard around here. Everything out of her mouth sounded like a warning wrapped in perfume. The first few times she cut across my lawn, I convinced myself it was accidental. Corner lots confuse people sometimes. GPS turns weird. Whatever. But then it became a routine. Every single morning around 6:45, she'd swing wide around the cul-de-sac, hop the curb, cut diagonally across my property, then reconnect to the next street so she could avoid the stop sign near the clubhouse. She was saving maybe 15 seconds. 15 seconds. And every morning she left behind fresh tire marks like little signatures of disrespect. Finally, one afternoon, I walked over there. Calm, polite, neighborly. I even brought over one of Linda's lemon loaf cakes because my wife still believed people could be reasoned with. Evelyn opened the door halfway, looked at the cake first, then at me like I was delivering a tax audit. "Hey," I said, smiling awkwardly. "I just wanted to ask if maybe you could avoid cutting across our lawn in the mornings. The irrigation lines are pretty shallow, and oh my God," she interrupted, already laughing. "You're serious?" I remember standing there blinking while she crossed her arms. "It's grass," she said, "not a wildlife preserve." "Well, it's still my property." That smile disappeared immediately. "Daniel, right?" she said. "Listen carefully. People around here don't usually create conflict with us. It tends to make life unpleasant." Now, maybe it was the way she said us. Or maybe it was 30 years of dealing with contractors who thought money made them smarter than everybody else. But something in my gut shifted right there on her front porch. I looked past her shoulder and noticed framed HOA awards hanging in the hallway like military medals. That explained everything. She didn't think she was a neighbor. She thought she owned the neighborhood. That night, Linda sat quietly beside me on the porch while I replayed the conversation in my head over and over. The sunset painted the yard gold, but all I could see were those tire tracks slicing across the grass like scars. "You okay?" Linda asked softly. I remember staring out toward the street, thinking about all the years I spent building things meant to last. Electrical foundations buried 6 feet underground, concrete bases designed to survive tornadoes, systems nobody noticed unless they failed. Then I took a slow sip of coffee and said something that made my wife laugh nervously. "You know what the funny thing about electricians is?" "What?" "We learn real early that every problem eventually comes down to grounding." And somewhere across the street, Evelyn Cross had absolutely no idea she was about to become the most expensive lesson of my entire retirement. The next morning at exactly 6:46, I heard her before I saw her. That deep engine growl rolling down the street while the sprinklers clicked softly across the yard. Linda was still asleep inside, sunlight barely creeping through the kitchen window, and for one stupid second I actually thought maybe she'd listened. Maybe the conversation worked. Then that black Range Rover came flying around the corner and cut straight through my lawn again, spraying mud across the flower beds so hard it smacked the porch railing like shotgun pellets. I just stood there holding my coffee while she disappeared down the block. No hosetashchen, no epaligi, nothing. That was the moment I stopped thinking of Evelyn Cross as a rude neighbor and started seeing her for what she really was, a bully who'd spent so many years getting her way, she honestly couldn't imagine consequences existing for her anymore. Now here's something people don't tell you about retirement. When you spend your whole life solving technical problems, your brain doesn't suddenly stop working because you got older. Mine definitely didn't. I'd spent decades designing systems where precision mattered. Inches mattered. Placement mattered. One small mistake in the wrong location could destroy an entire project. So I started paying attention. 3 mornings in a row, I sat on the porch, timing her route with my phone, like some suburban detective. 6:46 every single day. Same speed. Same angle. Same exact tire path across the corner of my property. By Friday, I'd installed 2 security cameras. Nothing dramatic. Just enough to document things in case the irrigation line finally snapped and flooded half the yard. The funny part was, once you start recording somebody like Evelyn, they usually hand you way more evidence than you were even looking for. Saturday night around 11:30, one of the cameras pinged my phone while Linda and I were watching old reruns in bed. I opened the footage expecting raccoons or teenagers or maybe somebody walking a dog. Instead, I watched Evelyn Cross stomp across my yard wearing yoga pants and a hoodie, carrying hedge clippers like she was invading Normandy. She crouched beside the flower beds and started cutting every single sprinkler head she could find. I remember Linda sitting up beside me going, "Oh my God, Daniel." Meanwhile, I'm just staring at the screen thinking, this woman has completely lost her mind. The footage was crystal clear too. Her face. Her car parked at the curb. Everything. Now, any reasonable person probably calls the police right there. I didn't. Not yet. Because I'd worked around enough legal disputes over construction contracts to know something important. The first person who loses their temper usually loses control of the story. And Evelyn clearly expected me to explode. So instead, I fixed the sprinkler heads the next morning and added motion lights along the property line. Bright ones too. Industrial-grade LEDs left over from a warehouse project years ago. The kind that turned nighttime into a prison break documentary. Monday morning, she came roaring across the lawn again. Hit the motion sensor, and suddenly 6 floodlights detonated at once across the grass. I swear to God her SUV swerved so hard I thought she hit something. Linda nearly spit coffee across the porch laughing. For about 2 seconds, I actually thought maybe we'd won. Maybe embarrassment would finally override entitlement. Then the HOA letters started showing up. Excessive lighting creating disturbance. Unauthorized electrical modifications. Possible safety hazard complaints filed by residents. Residents, plural, which was funny because every single complaint had the exact same grammatical mistakes Evelyn made when she posted in the neighborhood Facebook group. I framed the first one. Seriously, hung in my garage. Linda thought I was crazy until the second letter arrived threatening fines if I didn't remove the lights within 10 business days. That's when things stopped being funny. See, what Evelyn didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that I understood municipal code better than most city inspectors. 31 years in electrical contracting teaches you exactly how regulations work and exactly how corrupt people twist them when they think nobody's paying attention. Those lights were perfectly legal, completely compliant, which meant somebody inside the HOA was trying to weaponize enforcement against me anyway. And once that possibility entered my brain, I started digging. The first weird thing showed up during a property records search down at county offices. I wasn't even looking for anything major at first. I just wanted to confirm setback requirements for the lights in case Evelyn escalated things further. But while reviewing the survey maps, something fell off. The property dimensions on the current HOA documents didn't match the original survey attached to our purchase paperwork. At first I assumed clerical error. Then I measured the corner lot myself. 3 times. Same result every time. The eastern boundary line was nearly 15 feet short. I remember sitting at my kitchen table that night, surrounded by maps and measurements, while Linda watched me spiral into full electrician conspiracy mode. "You've got that look again," she said quietly. "What look?" "The one you get before tearing open walls." I laughed a little at that because she wasn't wrong. See, when electricians troubleshoot hidden problems, we learn to trust inconsistencies. Tiny ones. A voltage reading that's half a point off. A breaker humming when it shouldn't. Little things usually mean bigger things buried underneath. And those property records were humming. So Tuesday morning I call an old buddy named Ray Navarro. Retired surveyor. Former union guy. Smoked like a chimney. Complained about everybody. Smartest measurement expert I'd ever met. By Thursday, he was standing in my front yard holding a transit level while Evelyn glared at us through her kitchen window like an angry queen watching peasants organize a rebellion. Ray spent maybe 20 minutes checking the markers before he lowered the equipment and let out this long whistle. Well, he muttered, either you got robbed or somebody got real creative with county paperwork. Turns out my property line didn't stop near the sidewalk. It extended 18 feet further east, straight through the exact section Evelyn had been driving across for months. But that wasn't even the bad part. The bad part was her decorative retaining wall. For feet of it sat fully on my land. I remember this weird, quiet settling over me while Ray explained everything. Not anger exactly. More like that cold feeling you get right before a thunderstorm hits. Because suddenly all the pieces fit together. The HOA threats. The confidence. The way she kept saying they built the neighborhood. This woman hadn't just been cutting across my grass. Her family had literally stolen land. And the second Evelyn spotted those new survey flags in my yard, she stormed across the street so fast I thought she might actually swing at me. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" she snapped. I handed her a copy of Ray's survey. She barely glanced at it before shoving the papers against my chest. "That's impossible." "No," I said calmly. "Illegal is the word you're looking for." Her face changed right there. The fake polished smile disappeared completely. "You need to understand something, Daniel," she said softly, stepping closer. "People who make problems for my family usually regret it." Behind me, I could hear Linda open the front door. And for the first time since moving into Ashwood Creek, I saw genuine fear in my wife's face. That's the moment everything changed for me. Because now it wasn't about grass anymore. It wasn't about property lines. It was about somebody thinking they could intimidate my family inside our own home. And once that line got crossed, I stopped thinking like a retiree. I started thinking like a man building something permanent. The following Monday, I woke up before sunrise and poured myself a cup of coffee that tasted more like adrenaline than caffeine. Linda was sitting at the kitchen counter wrapped in one of my old flannel jackets, quietly watching me lace my boots like she already knew whatever came next was going to change things permanently. "You don't have to do this," she said softly. I looked out the window toward those survey flags glowing faint orange in the morning fog and smiled a little. "No," I said, "I really think I do." Now here's the thing about people like Evelyn Cross. They spend so much time pushing others around that eventually they stop believing resistance is even possible. She thought fear was permanent, thought money was permanent, thought influence was permanent. But concrete's pretty damn permanent too. 3 days later, a contractor crew arrived at my property with a mixer truck, rebar cages, excavation equipment, and enough concrete to build a highway support column. Evelyn nearly came unglued the second she saw them digging near the corner of the lot. She stormed across the street in giant sunglasses and designer sandals, waving her phone around like she was directing air traffic. "You can't build there," she snapped. I checked the survey paperwork in my hand. Actually, according to county records, I absolutely can. What even is that supposed to be? I looked directly at the spot where her SUV tires crossed every morning. Landscaping. Now, technically, I wasn't lying. The structure itself was a decorative concrete bollard, 42 inches high, reinforced steel core, 5 feet underground with commercial-grade footings. Completely legal, fully permitted, positioned 8 inches inside my property line, exactly where Ray's measurements confirmed Evelyn had been trespassing for months. The contractor took one look at my design specs and actually laughed. "Buddy," he said, "you planning to stop a truck?" I remember sipping coffee and answering, just preparing for recurring traffic issues. By Friday afternoon, it was finished. Beautiful too, honestly. Smooth stone finish. Bronza capitule. Small flower bed around the base. Looked classy enough to belong outside a courthouse. Linda stood beside me, staring at it quietly while evening sunlight hit the concrete. "You know she's going to lose her mind tomorrow," she whispered. I nodded slowly. Probably. Saturday passed quietly. Sunday too. Then Monday came. 6:46 in the morning. Right on schedule. I was already sitting on the porch when I heard the Range Rover accelerating down the block. Same engine growl. Same speed. Same entitled confidence. Evelyn came around the curve holding a coffee tumbler in one hand, phone in the other, completely locked into the routine she'd repeated for months without consequence. Then physics finally entered the conversation. The sound that came next. Lord, I still hear it sometimes. Not a crash exactly. More like metal discovering regret in real time. The passenger side wheel clipped the bollard dead center, and the entire SUV launched sideways with this violent, grinding explosion of shredded tire and bent suspension. Coffee blasted across her windshield. The bumper ripped halfway off. Something underneath the vehicle snapped loud enough to echo through the entire street. And then silence. Just steam hissing from the engine while birds scattered out of nearby trees. I took one slow sip of coffee. Across the lawn, Evelyn shoved her door open and stumbled out looking like a woman who'd just driven into the gates of hell. "What the hell I asked that?" she screamed. I pointed calmly toward the flower bed. "Decorative landscaping. You psychopath. You did this on purpose." "Well," I shrugged. "I put on my property. You drove onto my property." The look on her face right then. Honestly, I don't think it was anger anymore. I think for the first time in her life, she'd collided with a reality that couldn't be bullied. Neighbors started appearing almost immediately. Garage doors opening, curtains moving, phones recording. And here's the beautiful part. Nobody looked surprised. Officer Hale arrived about 20 minutes later, walked the property line himself, reviewed the survey paperwork, then crouched beside the bollard, trying very hard not to smile. Finally, he stood up and looked at Evelyn. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "why exactly were you driving across his yard?" This has always been the access route. Officer Hale blinked slowly. Across private property? You don't understand, no, he interrupted. I understand perfectly. That should have been the end of it. But people like Evelyn never stop at one bad decision. 2 nights later, my security cameras caught a construction excavator pulling up outside my house around midnight. I watched from the bedroom window while Evelyn stood beside it, whispering furiously to some guy in a reflective vest, pointing directly at the bollard. Linda looked terrified. Daniel, call somebody. Already dialing. Turns out utility companies don't usually perform emergency excavation work at midnight in luxury subdivisions, especially without permits. Police arrived fast, real fast, and when officers questioned the excavator operator, that man folded like a lawn chair at a hurricane picnic. Apparently, Evelyn had offered him 10 grand cash to accidentally remove my landscaping while pretending to investigate a gas leak. Unfortunately for her, he recorded the conversation. The arrest happened right there under my porch light. Handcuffs, patrol cars, neighbors filming from driveways while Evelyn screamed about lawsuits and conspiracies and trash people ruining communities. But the craziest part? That recording triggered a deeper investigation into property records around Ashwood Creek. Within months, county investigators uncovered altered surveys tied to Evelyn's husband's development company stretching across multiple subdivisions. Fraud, boundary manipulation, illegal land grabs. The whole thing exploded. Last I heard, her husband lost his contractor license, several HOA board members resigned, and the Cross family quietly moved out before winter. As for the bollard, it's still there. Linda planted lavender around it last spring, and every morning we sit on that porch together listening to sprinklers tick across the grass like nothing ever happened. Sometimes neighbors laugh when they walk past it. Sometimes they call it petty. Maybe it was. But honestly, if somebody kept driving over the one peaceful thing you built for the person you love most, what exactly would you have done different? And tell me the truth down in the comments, because half this neighborhood still thinks I went too far, while the other half says Evelyn got exactly what she deserved. So I want to hear your take. Was that justice, or was it revenge pretending to wear a tool belt?